If you've ever scraped ice off your windshield in April, paid your property taxes, and it felt like a second mortgage, well then, my friend, this video is for you. Today we're going to break down Minnesota versus Arkansas, looking at topics such as schools, healthcare, cost of living, weather, culture, and of course we're going to finish with a speed round with fun facts, sports, weird laws, and surprises that nobody talks about. My friend, if we haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Anthony Mosley. I'm a real estate broker here in Benton County, Arkansas. I used to live over in Carver County in a town called Waconia, Minnesota. And I help people just like you, after presenting them the facts, decide, is Arkansas going to be the next best place for you and your family to call home? You know, this video, I've been wanting to do it for such a long time, with Minnesota being in the news, maybe not for the greatest things. I thought now would be the best time to deliver this moving from Minnesota to Arkansas video for you, because my family did it back in 2019. We moved away from Minnesota via Kansas City and then here back in Arkansas, back to Arkansas in 2020. Quick short story here at the beginning. Before we relocated to Minneapolis, I had a corporate job here in Bentonville that took us up to Minnesota, and we moved to Waconia not knowing a soul. The only time I had ever been to Minnesota was through MSP Airport on a Northwest flight when I was, Northwest, when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, but never again until my early 30s with my wife and 2 young daughters in tow. Before why people are moving to Arkansas, why do people live in Minnesota? They like the high quality of life. They like strong public services. But you and I both know, if you're watching this from Minnesota, you have long winters. It took us a little bit to realize when we moved to Minnesota how people were answering. I said, oh, how long have you lived in Minnesota? And they told me how long they lived in Minnesota by how many winters they endured. Oh, we've lived here 9 winters. Oh, we've lived here 25 winters. And it was like, oh, winter's coming.
Winter's coming.
And many residents love living in Minnesota. The summers are absolutely gorgeous. But when it comes to retirement, when it comes to really looking at life, do you really want to live in the cold, harsh winters? Do you really want to be able to throw boiling water in the air and it dissipate before it hits the ground? Well, if you don't, then again, maybe this video is specifically for you. We have a slower way of life down here in Arkansas, more of a temperate climate, which we're going to get into more detail about. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you may know that I take a city in your state and compare it to a city in Arkansas. I usually use Bentonville because Bentonville is one of the most expensive places to live in the entire state of Arkansas. There in Minnesota, where we live out in Waconia, wasn't as expensive of an area, say, for instance, Wayzata, Minnetonka, or even Edina. I picked out Edina, but let's look state per state real quick. One of the biggest costs of living we have is housing. According to sources online, the median sale price of a home in Minnesota in 2025 was somewhere between $340,000 to $360,000. Again, that's median prices, and that is a range because some sources said $340,000, some sources said $360,000. You and I both know you can hardly find a home in Edina for $360,000, but we'll get to that. Here in Arkansas, many sources said somewhere between $260,000 and $280,000 for a median home price here in Arkansas. Now looking at Edina, the median home sale price, I believe was according to redfin.com, was $548,000. Here in Bentonville, the median home sale price was right around $500,000. Comparatively speaking, Edina and Bentonville, median house price about the same, but the houses don't look anything alike. I use many different sources online. This time I happened to use Redfin, and I picked a random house in Edina off of Halifax that is $1,050,000. The house was built in the mid-'80s. It was a 4-bed, 3-bath, 2,700 square foot home on 0.21 acres. Now, 0.21 acres, that might be a decent-sized city lot. For comparison's sake, I found a home here in Bentonville. I picked a random house down closer to downtown because I wanted to get to that same type of $1 million price point level. Now, as we're drilling down, please understand I'm looking at one specific house in Edina compared to one specific house here in Bentonville. Of course, when we're talking about averages, we can find a cheaper house. We can find a more expensive house. But to kind of give that comparison, in Edina, where they're scraping houses and building new, I wanted to find something that was maybe 40 to 50 years old or older, so it wasn't comparing new construction there versus new construction here in Bentonville. So here in Bentonville, they're doing a lot of what they did in Edina, at least when we lived there, is they're scraping the lot and building something new. So I wanted to find something that was also 40 to 50 years old or older here in Bentonville. So I found a 4-bed, 3-bath, 3,700 square feet on 3/10 of an acre also built in the 1980s. The current valuation of the house is $1.5 million. Now, granted, of course, the valuation price is about $500,000 higher. And taxes on the house in downtown Bentonville is $2,814. Now, granted, just like you have there in Minnesota, there are certain regulations that if it's your primary residence, you can receive a homestead tax credit. Would you be surprised to know the house there off of Halifax in Minnesota, in Edina, Minnesota, the taxes were $12,925. Let's take it one step further and talk about my old home there in Minnesota when we sold in 2019, what its value is today compared to the home that I live in now here in Bentonville. There in Waconia, I live just west of the Target, not too far from Mocha downtown. That home was built in 2013, was on 0.25 acres, had around 3,450 square feet. We finished the basement. It was built by Mattamy. I'm sure you guys remember Mattamy. According to redfin.com, is $548,000, and last year's taxes was $6,806. Whereas my home here in Bentonville is on a half an acre, so double the lot size, 3,600 square feet. And according to the same website, redfin.com, my house is worth $781,600. But our taxes on our home here were nearly $1,800 less at $5,027. What I'm getting at with all this, my friends, is property taxes are significantly less in the few examples that we've talked about, but they might get you on the actual purchase of the house. I don't want to draw the wrong conclusion here, my friend, but please understand you can certainly find a more affordable house in Minnesota and even a more affordable house in Arkansas. I was trying to draw some correlation to property taxes. That's enough about taxes, but in regards to cost of living, everything across the board, including groceries, gas, utilities, and even insurance, are consistently cheaper here in Arkansas than they are there. And of course, the heating bills there in Minnesota can be brutal, especially for 4 or 5 months when you guys get sub-zero temperatures, those polar vortexes that come through. And conversely, Arkansas utilities tend to spike in the summer months where we're trying to keep it cooler in the June, July, and August months. But overall, costs are lower here in Arkansas. I would encourage you to go to Forbes.com or another online cost of living calculator, plug in your city there in Minnesota, and compare it to maybe some cities you might be interested in here in Arkansas. In regards to the corporate scene, here in Arkansas, we have Fortune 500 companies like Walmart, Tyson, J.B. Hunt Transportation. Dillard's Department Store is headquartered here in Arkansas, whereas there in Minnesota, you have ConAgra, 3M, Target, just to name a couple. That being said, job opportunities there in Minnesota might be a little bit better also than what you might find here in Arkansas. But again, the cost of living, the income difference between Minnesota to Arkansas, again, look at that cost of living calculator to be able to tell how much you do or don't have to make if you were to choose to move here if you are still an income earner. Next, we touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about weather. I know that you know, my friend, the winters there in Minnesota are much more brutal than they are here in Arkansas. For instance, your average snowfall, depending on where you are in the state, can range anywhere from 36 to 70 inches, with the Twin Cities being right around 50 to 55 inches of snowfall a year. Whereas here in Arkansas, again, depending on where you are in the state, up here in the northwest corner, we might average around 9 inches a year. Where you guys, I remember living there. I think it was 2017 or 2018. There was a snowfall in February, right around 22 to 24 inches out in Carver County. But here in Arkansas, from the northwest corner all the way down to the southeast corner of Arkansas might see less than an inch of snowfall each year. In regards to days below zero, you might be interested to know that in the Twin Cities, there's an average of 22 days each year below zero. Whereas here in Arkansas, specifically Bentonville, we're going to see on average 0.2 days below zero. Conversely, on the other side, in regards to hot days, it's not the heat that'll get you, it's the humidity that'll get you here in Arkansas. And I know you might say, my friends, that Minnesota is humid, but if you haven't been to Arkansas in June, July, and August, especially South Arkansas, you might be singing a different tune. Days above 90 in Minnesota averages around 13 days. Here in Bentonville, we only average around 16.2 days above 90 degrees. But let's lower the mercury just a little bit so we can find out where that change is in Minnesota. Days above 80 degrees average there in Minnesota around 70 days a year. You're seeing above 80 degrees, which is awesome. Here in Arkansas, we're seeing more around 100 days each year above 80 degrees. In fact, I can remember at least 2 or 3 Christmases here in Arkansas where it's been above 60 to 65 degrees. If you're dreaming of a white Christmas, and you want to move to Arkansas, you're dreaming. But my family loved the snow, my friend. My girls got to experience their first time ever real sledding. They got to experience it there in Minnesota. Of course, we went skiing at Highlands. We went skiing at Lutsen. We went tubing over at Buck Hill. And it was so fun to always tell the stories to our family and friends back here in Arkansas. One of our favorite stories to tell is our first winter back here in Arkansas. The girls were outside. We had just gotten like 4 inches of snow, and it was maybe 20, 22 degrees outside. And one of the moms in our neighborhood called us and said, "Hey, we're concerned about your daughters. Are they okay? They've been outside for like 45 minutes and they're not going to do so well out in that cold weather." My wife and I were rolling. It was hilarious because we're like, our daughters used to spend hours on end outside, face down in the snow, just eating the snow, let alone being outside right outside of our front window here and playing in 22-degree weather. Not a big deal, but then again, we were geared up for it there in Minnesota. We were used to that cold weather, whereas here in Arkansas it was like, man, it's 60 degrees. It's getting kind of chilly. But I would encourage you to understand you might acclimate over a couple years to where your blood thins out a little bit as to being so thick. So yeah, when it's below 30 degrees, I start getting a little chilly. But I don't need the winter jackets and the gloves and the snow boots as much as I did in Minnesota. Another personal story for you is one of our last winters there. I actually took our 24-inch Ariens 2-stage snowblower and piled up all the snow in our backyard, and it ended up being right around 15 to 18 feet tall, about 30 to 40 feet long, and the girls sled down it. We built an igloo right in the middle. I absolutely love telling that story because it's so much fun. We don't have that here. So if you're wanting snow and you're wanting to move to Arkansas, you can basically drive straight north from Arkansas and get to Minnesota in about 9 or 10 hours if you really want to enjoy the snow. So some trade-off there is in Minnesota, you're going to have to endure the winter, whereas here in Arkansas, you might have to maintain during the summer months with a pool, with some time at a splash pad or on the lake. Let's bring our attention next to schools. But before we do, my friend, if you are considering moving to Arkansas and you don't have kids school age or even grandkids school age, and you're not worried about schools, I would encourage you to still listen through and pay attention to where the good schools are here in Arkansas, because whenever the time comes for you to sell your home here in Arkansas, it helps to have a home in a really good school district that helps the general population want to go and buy your home, makes your home more desirable, if you will. Now, schools in general, Arkansas is way down the list according to usnews.com. Arkansas ranks 36th in education, whereas there in Minnesota ranks out of the 50 states 11th. So your schools are much better than our schools here. However, I would ask you to take a look at a website called niche.com. They use the same ranking per state across the country. Edina ranked 3rd in the state for Minnesota, whereas Bentonville, the city we're comparing Edina to, ranked as number 1 in the state. And if you're curious, Wayzata and Minnetonka both rank just a little bit higher than Edina schools, with Eden Prairie coming in at 4th. So much like your best schools in the state are kind of centered around Minneapolis, kind of the suburbs, if you will, here in Northwest Arkansas, up in the northwest corner of the state, that's where we find a very big grouping of some of our best schools in the state. Not that there aren't good schools in Jonesboro or Little Rock or other parts of the state. Understand that if you're wanting to be around some of the best schools, you might want to live in Eden Prairie, Edina, Victoria, Waconia. Whereas here in Arkansas, you might want to live in Bentonville, Bella Vista, Centerton, Fayetteville. As a comparison, if you are a parent with school-age children, you and I both know that there are great school administrators and teachers at one school that have a high rating, and there are also not so great teachers and administrators at a school that has a very high rating. So it may depend on what grade your child is in. It may depend on what subjects they're taking, or if they do sports or don't do sports. Those are the things you really need to look at across the board using a website like niche.com. Taking it a step further there in Minnesota, you have strong statewide performance metrics, high graduation rates, well-funded districts, whereas here in Arkansas, you'll see more variation by district, strong charter and private options, smaller class sizes in many areas, and a lot of growth and development again here in Northwest Arkansas and West Little Rock. Key takeaways in this section is Minnesota, predictably consistent, whereas here in Arkansas, great options do exist, but you got to do your homework. If you're considering moving to Arkansas, and specifically Northwest Arkansas, down in the comments is a link to provide your information to receive my relocation guide. Consider this our first steps of potentially working together in helping you and your family move here to Northwest Arkansas. Moving on to healthcare, yet again, Minnesota outperforms Arkansas according to usnews.com. Arkansas ranks all the way down at number 47, whereas Minnesota ranks at number 16. Now, they're taking into consideration quality, access, and public health as a whole. Minnesota, there you have the Mayo Clinic down in Rochester. There's nationally respected healthcare systems, shorter wait times in your metro areas, and you have excellent specialty care there in Minnesota. Whereas here in Arkansas, very much like schools, we have strong regional hubs. For instance, my daughter is deaf, cochlear implant. She had her cochlear implant surgery done at Children's in St. Paul. And every time after one of her appointments, we would go over to Red Cow to celebrate afterwards. Oh my gosh, now I'm dreaming of some Red Cow. Oh, cowboy burger, pretzel bun. Anyway, we had to go there for more of that specialized service, but St. Paul to Waconia was only 35 to 40 minutes away. But here in Arkansas, for our daughter to get that same level of care, we have to go all the way down to Little Rock, which is about 3.5-hour drive. Many of the clients that I help move here to Arkansas still try to get a referral from their doctor, their specialist, wherever they move from, to try to find somebody here in Arkansas. I had one client move here from Denver, and the closest specialist that they had was all the way over in Dallas. Another referral was all the way up in Kansas City. You might have to consider that as a hindrance if you're looking to move here to Arkansas. Lifestyle and culture. There in Minnesota, you're the land of 10,000 lakes, whereas here in Arkansas, we're the land of 10,000 reservoirs. There's actually hardly any actual lakes here in Arkansas. If you're familiar with what an oxbow is, a river goes outside of its banks, and then as it comes in, there's water that's left behind. Those are called oxbow lakes, which were made from a river, whereas there in Minnesota, you have spring-fed lakes. And a lake being considered over 10 acres, I understand that 10,000 lakes is Minnesota nice for more like 11,600 some. But again, here in Arkansas, we have so many rivers and streams that most of our bodies of water, specifically like Beaver Lake, here in Northwest Arkansas, is part of the White River system, and it was dammed up in the mid-60s. Which, being outside, you have that culture of living outdoors. Now, when we lived up in Minnesota, I literally used to ride my fat bike across Lake Waconia in the winter months. It was one of my favorite rides to do, to ride around the lake and then cut straight across, making sure the ice was thick enough. But what I really appreciated about life in Minnesota is that no matter the season, you really live the season. Of course, you could get shut indoors and not go out if you didn't make a concerted effort about it. Here in Arkansas, being the natural state, there's hunting, fishing, camping, boating, and of course, mountain biking here in Arkansas. Now, I know you've got mountain biking in Minnesota. I used to ride my mountain bike there. Minnesota has plenty of mountain biking, from the Stovepipe all the way down to Cuyuna, the new mountain bike park over in Carver County, over near Victoria, Minnesota. But I've come to find out that depending on trail conditions, you can only ride those so many times of the year. Whereas here in Arkansas, you can pretty much ride the trails year-round. And more trails developing and growing here in Arkansas. We have some of the best single-track mountain biking trails, according to the town itself. We're the mountain biking capital of the world here in Bentonville, and I don't want to make this all about Northwest Arkansas. There's mountain biking the entire state. Down by Mount Nebo, Mount Magazine, Devil's Den, Lake Leatherwood. And with more of a temperate climate, we don't have to wait for the ice to go out on the lakes here in Arkansas. We can use them a little bit more year-round for fishing and boating. But then again, in the winter months, you and I both know, like Lake Minnetonka, I actually drove my Jeep out. I think I've got a picture of it. I drove my Jeep out on Lake Minnetonka one time just to say I could do it. But the lakes don't freeze over here, so if you're looking for ice fishing, we don't really have that here. From what I recall, Minnesota's culture was more structured, more civic-minded, and maybe the rules mattered a little bit more there in Minnesota, whereas here in Arkansas, it's a bit more relational and informal, slower way of life, definitely. I mean, slow way down. More community-driven with faith, family, and outdoors plays a bigger role. I would say here, personally, for me, even again, though my stories that I told you about Minnesota, I find myself outdoors a lot more here in Arkansas. What people notice here in Arkansas is maybe a friendlier day-to-day interactions and less bureaucracy, but more accountability. I don't know what that might mean and how that lands with you, but just understand that there in Minnesota, you have Minnesota Nice, which means everything from helping shovel your neighbor's driveway all the way over to being very passive-aggressive and saying something about the person behind their back. Whereas here in Arkansas, we say things like, bless your heart. I don't necessarily say that, but bless your heart can mean, oh, you're so sweet, to, oh, dear Lord, help them. And one thing I have to say, it took me a little while to realize I was doing it down here, is when people say, hey, we should grab coffee sometime, in Minnesota that meant like, hey, I gotta go, but we should get together sometime, just to kind of get out the door, right? In Minnesota, goodbye. It's another thing to get you a little bit closer to the door. Whereas here in Arkansas, when you say, we should get coffee sometime, you're probably going to get a text, or they'll even press you right there. Well, what works for you? When would you like to get together? And they genuinely want to get together with you.
Hey man, what's going on?
Hey man, where are you? Before we hit our last topic of the day, I wanted to definitely share some of our most favorite family memories are from there in Minnesota. From taking the girls to see Gooseberry Falls, my real estate career started there in Minnesota in 2014. I had the honor of serving meteorologist Cody Matz in helping him find a home about 10 years ago.
You can always tell when we get that heavy, wet snow because it covers the sign. I don't even know what it says, no trespassing.
The cute little town of Waconia, being able to leave our house and park right in front of the movie theater, and the guy at the movie theater knowing my name, knowing the town and the people at Waconia Brewing Company. Of course, the Mall of America, and of course, going to the Great Minnesota Get-Together with everybody else in the state, having everything fried. Whether you start your trip at the state fair getting a bucket or leaving with a bucket, either way, you cannot go to the Minnesota State Fair without grabbing an entire bucket of Sweet Martha's cookies. Every year on summer solstice, usually around June 20th, we would go to the east side of Lake Waconia and we'd watch the sunset as a family. Personally, in case you've never noticed, that little placard right up there, that's from the Hits Triathlon series where they came out to Waconia and had a whole triathlon series. The Lake Waconia Triathlon, where they had to cancel the swim portion or shorten it because the waves were so choppy there in June, where the ice had gone out not much more than 60 days before the triathlon. My family and I celebrating Nickel Dickle Day, watching our daughters run the Nickel Dickle Tickle. As I always do at the end of my state-to-state comparison videos, let's go into a bit of a speed round. Major League sports teams, we don't have them here in Arkansas. Whereas in Minnesota there you have the Twins, the Timberwolves, and of course the Minnesota Vikings. Here in Arkansas, again, no major sports teams, but college sports is a really big thing, especially here in Northwest Arkansas with the Razorbacks. No, I will not call those Hogs, but James, if you want to just shoot that in there real quick so they can hear what that sounds like. Minnesota, you have blizzards and polar vortexes, where here in Arkansas, we see just about as many tornadoes as you do, believe it or not, but maybe a little bit more powerful tornadoes, thunderstorms, and hailstorms. In the last presidential election, Minnesota voted blue, Arkansas voted red. According to my research, Minnesota's mosquitoes are smaller and less aggressive than they are here in Arkansas. I know that's your state bird and everything, and in case you're wondering, because we have more of a temperate climate, they have more opportunity to hatch and stick around a bit longer. Fun laws I was able to find, according to Minnesota Statute 343.36, it is illegal to have a competition where you are trying to chase around a greased, oiled, or otherwise lubricated pig. It is illegal to do so. Here in Arkansas, you might be interested to know, it is illegal to walk your cow down Main Street in Little Rock on Sunday after 1 o'clock. Before 1 o'clock, totally fine. And the great debate, duck, duck, goose, duck, duck, gray duck. My friend, I found a map for you to help you understand. If you were to move here, please understand the rest of the country, according to this map, believes it is duck, duck, goose. Now, I know I might have offended somebody there, but my friend, it's always a pleasure to put this information together for you. And now you know a little bit more about what life is like in and around Bentonville and Arkansas. Thanks for watching.